I wanted to talk a little bit about Florida waterbirds. So this is something that a couple of my friends realized was something I just oddly know a lot about. To give you some context, for one, live in Florida. I lived on a river, and I also, when I was younger, went to a lot of marine science camps. So what I learned from there is oddly a lot about birds. But because we do have a lot of different types of birds here in Florida, and a lot of interestingly sized birds, per se, if you go up into the northern areas, there tends to be a lot of tree dwelling birds, the smaller birds. But here in Florida, we have a lot of larger birds. So today we're going to talk about a set of medium sized birds. And so what we are going to be talking about is snake birds. And so this is not to be confused with shriveled up snake women. These are snake birds. And this is a category of bird that makes you ask the question, why is that water moccasin out of the water like it were a cobra on land? And that is because it is not actually a water moccasin, it is a snake bird where most of the bird is submerged underwater. So we see this situation where there will be some sort of snake looking creature out of the water like this, but that is because there is actually an entire bird underneath. And so this is obviously a theoretical blob representation of our snake bird, because we're going to be getting into a little bit more of the specifics of the actual snake birds themselves. So along the way, if you guys have any questions about anything specific you're seeing on the screen, then please feel free to leave those in the chat. I will be watching that. But yeah, I'm going to get rid of this picture. And we're going to be talking about two different birds. So in Florida, when we talk about snake birds, there are two that really come up. And the problem is they're very similar in their actual behaviors. So let's talk about the similarities first. So things you might see this snake bird doing. So if we redraw our first picture, then you can see category one, what I would like to call the Loch Ness monster. The snake birds will swim with their head above the water, like so. So this is just a theoretical bird. It's not either of our two. So category two. In Florida, we have a lot of man-made retention ponds. So if you have a pond here, what will happen is these retention ponds are set up as a drainage system for a lot of the surrounding area. If you have like a neighborhood, and what will be there is there will actually be this kind of like pump box. I'm not sure if this is actually where the water is coming in, or whether this is where the water is going out to some other drainage system to keep it from hitting some level. That seems pretty reasonable. But what you'll actually see is you'll a lot of times see birds here with their wings out like so, and they will just be sitting there, kind of just taking it in. And the reason for this is in order for a bird to fly, they must be fairly light. And when a bird is wet, they are not as light because their feathers have soaked in that water. So these birds actually will sit on these metal contraptions and dry their wings. Now I do see a question in the chat. It says, and this is Leon asking, how long do you intend the stock market seasons to be going? Are you planning on adding any more features as time goes on? So the stock markets, according to the precedent set by the first season, are going about 26 weeks, which is half a year. So we are, I believe, in week 14, if I remember correctly. Actually, yes, I think that is correct. So we are in week 14. And so that means we are a little over halfway through this season, and I probably won't add any new features until the next season, if that answers your question. So these are two relatively normal cases, and then also this is pretty common for a lot of water birds, but you'll see them just kind of sitting on these disappearing islands. Um, oh, actually, no. So what you'll see is there'll be a lot of dead trees along the river, and so the water birds, in a similar fashion to these retention pond um, situations, they will actually stand along at the top of these dead trees, whether they be dead palm trees or I believe there's also mangroves that will get pretty large and then dry up. They tend to like to stand at the top of these mangrove trees. So I'm hoping that if you have experienced any of the Florida water birds, um, these situations may be ringing a bell for what birds I am referring to. So this is situation 3. And so these are the pretty common situations that you may see these birds in. Now, if I'm missing any and those in the chat wish to share those with me, I will add them to the list here. But for now, we are going to move on to actually deciphering between the two very common snake birds. So let's get a new picture here. And we are going to split this down the middle. We're going to create a T-chart here. Uh, so what we want to look at here is first we are looking at the anhinga. And I want to make sure I'm spelling this correctly. Anhinga. And if I go check out, yes, I have spelled that correctly. So this is the anhinga, and this is actually a fairly well-known bird amongst the snake birds. I would say of the two, most people will be able to spout out the word anhinga before they will spout out our second bird here. But we're going to focus on the anhinga for a moment. Now, the real big difference between these two birds is their actual head. The rest of their body is fairly similar, but we'll show a little bit more differences. So the anhinga is, if we start to draw their head like so, they have this very sharp beak, and then their head actually, I haven't done it justice. So their head is actually quite flat on the bottom, and they have small beady eyes. And so, like I said, they have this long, sharp beak, and this beak is actually used to pierce fish while underwater so that they can be consumed later. So this is our anhinga. They are relatively round-topped on the head, and they are fairly streamlined. So this would be, if we were comparing it to some sort of Chevrolet car, this would be your Corvette. I don't even know if I spelled Corvette right, but there we go. I don't own a Corvette, so I don't know how to spell it. And this is a V, and this is an R, for those of you that may be confused. So the anhinga is streamlined with a sharp beak. And they also have sort of a smoky, dark brown texture to them. So these are the features that are associated with an anhinga. So if we go to our second bird here, our second bird is actually a cormorant. Cormorant. There we go. And so there are actually a lot of similar features about this. They are about the same size. They are about their behaviors, as previously mentioned, are very similar. They are also a dark brown, but they are actually a glossy brown. But we're going to show you the actual head shape. So if we draw this, I want to try and be accurate to the actual size. Now they have I believe they have somewhat larger eyes, or at least more noticeable. Yes. So I'll try and make that apparent. And they also one of their defining features is their beak. So in Hingas, although both of them can have somewhat yellow beaks, the cormorants tend to have more significantly standing out beaks, and they also have this kind of falcon-shaped um, downwards uh, curve to their beak. I believe this is better in terms of keeping things in your mouth. If I had to guess things, if I had to guess the actual evolutionary purpose, they also tend to have some little tufts on the top of their head here, but those once wet are not as noticeable. The Inhinga tends to be a little bit more streamlined, as previously mentioned. But the rest of their body is fairly similar, although they tend to be a little bit more round-bellied compared to the Inhinga. So that would be the cormorant, and this would be the Inhinga. So I guess this kind of gives them a more cartoony look if you're trying to get an idea of this. And they also, so if this were going with our Chevrolet idea, then this would be your Camaro. Um, it's the I guess kind of the muscle car build of the snakebird family. So as I mentioned, they are a little bit bulkier. Um, they're about the same height. They have a curved beak, and they also are a glossy dark brown. And they are a little bit darker, so glossy dark brown. So that is pretty much it for the snakebirds. So these are two very common birds, but I feel like a lot of people will see them and not necessarily decipher the difference. They'll just say, "Oh, that's one of those snakebirds," but it's actually two different, completely different species. So, um, well, they may be cousins or something. I don't know. I haven't done too much actual biological research. This is just my own experience from living in Florida and going out and experiencing the wild. So I hope that you have learned something from this talk here, and we are actually going to be moving on to a talk about my AI. So I am going to clean this up, but I hope you are enjoying. If you have any questions about this section and you want to ask those before I move on to the next, I'm going to be cleaning stuff up, so go ahead and post those in the chat, and I will make sure to cover them before I move on to the next section.